Welcome to the Ducks Unlimited podcast, the only podcast about all things waterfowl. From hunting insights to science-based discussions about ducks, geese, and issues affecting waterfowl and wetlands conservation in North America, we bring the resource to you. The DU Podcast with your host, Chris Jennings.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Ducks Unlimited podcast. I'm your host, Chris Jennings. Joining us today is Jay Anglin, the Waterfowl 360 Great Lakes Migration Editor. Jay, welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Awesome, man. And hey, we wanted to get Jay on. He is in the process of working on some migration alerts for ducks.org. And of course, this time of year, we're just constantly doing these teal reports, teal updates. So let's go ahead and start off with this, Jay. What are you hearing in the Great Lakes states?
I'm hearing mostly positive reports. I mean, of course, you hear some local guys complain, but the bottom line is a biologist and field technicians, all the property managers I've spoken with throughout the Great Lakes, and I'm talking from Manitoba and Minnesota, border all the way down to Ohio. Everybody is saying that they're seeing, reasonable number of birds, in some cases, excellent number of birds. And all the usual, places where you'd expect to see teal. So that's a really good sign. I know I've personally encountered teal the last 2 days right around the state line of Indiana and Michigan, just flying up and down the river when I was guiding fishermen. So, I mean, to me, it seems normal or even better than normal at this point.
Yeah, and I think the timing of that switched pretty quick. It was blazing, at least here in Memphis, it was blazing hot. I know it was pretty hot up there in Indiana that last week in August. We switch into September. All of a sudden, we have a big north wind today. I'm sure you guys have been getting it for the last couple of days. Do you think that's going to impact anything with these birds?
Well, last night it was clear and cool, and there was north winds. And I looked at the forecast. I kind of bounced around, Green Bay, Saginaw Bay, up to the Sioux in Michigan. Southwest Wisconsin is about the only place I saw something that didn't have a northerly component. Clear skies, cool nights in the 50s. It's just a classic, scenario for excellent teal migration. And in particular, we'll get these first waves of birds are going to be predominantly blue wings. But I'm already hearing some people mention green wings in this area. So we're going to, it looks like things are really getting revved up just in time.
Green wings. That's interesting. Now in your report, you kind of, you start out, talking about Minnesota and some of the really dry conditions out there. Kind of elaborate on the Minnesota conditions that you kind of have been researching.
So Minnesota, of all the states, was probably, the most impacted by this ongoing severe drought, which obviously extends up into the prairie pothole region, which is impacting, water levels up there, and in some cases duck production locally. But Minnesota definitely has taken it on the chin in a lot of areas. Now, a state that size, obviously, you're going to have plenty of lakes. It is, the land of 1,000 lakes. So
I think it's 10,000, isn't it?
10,000, yeah. What am I saying? Yeah, I'm thinking of the county next to me, 1,000 lakes, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, 10,000 lakes. And marshes are just, they're everywhere. So the bottom line is that when these marshes dry up, as everyone knows that, has hunted for a long time and paid attention, and obviously waterfowl managers, moist soil, vegetation growth is really good for waterfowl, emergent vegetation. These marshes need to recharge once in a while in terms of, the vegetation base. So I think what really is what's set up here is even in Minnesota, where it continues to be dry in much of the state, once we do get some nice rains, there is going to be so much duck food. So we're going to have a really great season, I think, in a lot of areas where guys are thinking, boy, we don't have any water. This is terrible. But really, it's just going to take a couple of good, rains to come through. And it's going to fill those, those low-lying areas, and you're going to have tons and tons of food for ducks. The biggest drawback, as mentioned in that report, is access. So in some of those areas where you have these huge mud flats, and now there's water in the middle, and, I'm more than likely going to be some birds and especially teal. It's just going to be accessing those areas as a hunter to get to them and do it in a way that's, feasible or safe for that matter.
Yeah, and I would think that even some of those same conditions are carrying over into Wisconsin and parts of Illinois. Some dry, some. I know they've had a little bit more precipitation around there in some of those areas. What are you hearing in Illinois?
So Illinois had some interesting things occur especially in the Illinois River Valley and the adjacent Mississippi. But the IRV had some big floods this spring that kind of wiped out some of their vegetation. And then when they finally dried out, because it's been just as dry there as it has, been here up until a couple of weeks ago, they dried out and they got some really good plant growth and, even some millet that was planted. And apparently they've had some issues with some insects and some other things. So, the habitat there is a little bit compromised, but, knowing the IRV and some of those key areas in Illinois that are just absolute, meccas for waterfowl, as they recover with the rains we've been getting, I'm sure that they're going to come out and in the long run being the hot spot as usual, So
Yeah.
they're recovering nicely, it sounds like.
Good. Yeah, no, and I'm sure, I know Indiana, at least where I was from in Indiana, hasn't really been that dry. They've gotten some fairly timely rains. But up in your area and then throughout the whole state, what are you hearing there?
So we were really dry, and some of the places I've hunted the last few years are just, I could probably drive my Suburban across them and not even crack the soil. So now within the last few weeks, we've had some serious heavy rains. A lot of flooding has occurred. Just localized flooding, sheet water. I've noticed some soybeans took it on the chin and browned out because it just takes them a couple days underwater and they're done. So I suspect that as the ground becomes more saturated, we're definitely still technically in a drought situation in many of these counties, but just a couple more, thunderstorms, and I think you're going to be relatively normal. And again, the rivers and the lakes and the larger ponds and some of the bigger wetlands, they still have water. So in terms of what kind of impact will it have on not just the teal season, but looking beyond that, I think, there's going to be some issues with some mud flats and stuff, but for the most part, there's still going to be plenty of habitat. And so I think we're in pretty good shape overall.
Were you able to talk to anyone down in southern Indiana at Goose Pond?
Yeah, I talked to Callie down there, and she said that they're putting water on some of those units. And she said they were holding teal as of late last week. When I spoke to her, they were holding a decent number of birds already. And, in these areas that have been a little dry, where they have the ability to manipulate water levels and actually put water on these, moist soil units. The same thing up here at Willow Slough with Mike Schoaf, the property manager over there. He's been putting water on for a few days. And he said by, the opener, he'll be in good shape. And the same goes for Goose Pond and some of the other properties. So.
Yeah, that hunting down there at Willow Slough and Goose Pond can be really good. And I know my sister actually has a draw at Willow Slough. I want to say third or fourth pick on the second day, maybe opening day. So she's pretty fired up about that, her and her boyfriend. So that'll be pretty cool. Wishing them luck down up there. As we kind of rotate around the Great Lakes, and usually this state, Michigan, typically with these large bodies of water and large rivers cutting through, there's a lot of habitat out there for these migrating teal to pass through. What are you hearing up there?
I'm sorry, I lost you for just a second there.
Oh, okay. No, I just said, Michigan, typically known for the large bodies of water and rivers, substantial amount of habitat. What are you hearing throughout Michigan?
Michigan is, of all the states I've spoken with and property managers, Michigan was probably the one that was shining the brightest in terms of teal possibilities. Just about everybody I spoke with was holding, on a given property, anywhere from 300 to 1,000 teal in a given unit. So that just tells you, they're obviously not peeling away all the layers. They're just doing a quick survey and they're seeing big flocks of teal. So, and that goes for the Upper Peninsula all the way down to the Indiana and Ohio state line. I think they're in really good shape. I suspect we'll hear some great reports out of Michigan the next couple of days.
Awesome. That bodes well for just about everyone, south of there too. That's good news for all those hunters. And last but not least, Ohio. Any positive reports from Ohio?
So the marshes along, the western basin of Lake Erie really are the teal hot spots for that state. Southern Ohio, of course, in central Ohio, there are some fish and wildlife areas that have, excellent habitat, and they're starting to pick up a few birds. But definitely Lake Erie, the western basin really kind of goes in line with Michigan in terms of, Lake St. Clair marshes and Saginaw Bay, and they're about lockstep. They're definitely picking up a lot of birds. and adjacent Michigan, right there along the Detroit River and the western basin of Lake Erie, same thing, plenty of birds. So I really think, again, this is one of those years when there's birds all over the place, and you just got to be out there. So I think a lot of hunters are going to find that if they can find water that's huntable, they're going to find teal.
Yeah, no, I'll just go ahead and add to that. Knowing as someone who grew up teal hunting in Indiana, West Central Indiana, it really is a game of you just have to go. A lot of times, you may find a few, loafing here and there, but a lot of the times situations that we got into where we had really good success, we didn't necessarily have large numbers of birds around, but we went and we were just kind of catching those birds as they were kind of hopscotching down the flyway. So, that's my recommendation for people out there. It's really, if you get the chance to go ahead and go.
I couldn't agree with you more. That's kind of what I do up here. I just expect migration. I pick the days that I think it's going to be good, and I can't think of many days where I didn't see at least a few birds. So
yeah, and I don't want to put you on the spot here, but where is your secret teal hotspot? No, I'm just kidding. I wouldn't do that to you. No, I wanted to kind of roll over because I know you guys are going to start an early Canada goose season as well. What's your conditions look like locally? I don't want to necessarily, put you on the spot for conditions throughout the Great Lakes, because I know that hasn't been your focus right now, but definitely in your area, I know you're in tune with that.
I've actually paid quite a bit of attention because I started seeing some molt migrants roll back in, 3 or 4 days ago. And I usually make a few phone calls. And, speaking to these managers, I mentioned, I brought goose up all over the place. Everybody is saying it was excellent year production wise, even with a lack of water in some areas. Certainly that is the case here. We had tons of broods earlier, this summer. I'm seeing excellent numbers of geese throughout Michigan and Indiana. It's in terms of, crops, really the biggest thing around here is when the farmers chop corn for silage, and they started chopping about 10 days ago. I took a quick spin this morning real quick, and within 10 miles of me, I probably saw 1,000 acres of chopped corn stubble. So that's good, because the birds, that's going to get them out of town, get them off the golf courses, where they need to go for us to take advantage of the situation. And things are shaping up real good for geese too. I mean, I spoke to a lot of people that said geese were, there were exceptional numbers of geese on a given property when I was inquiring about teal. So that's a really, really good sign as well.
Awesome. And my last question for you here, because you touched on it briefly right before, and I'm always intrigued. How's the fishing been up there?
It's been okay. It's been pretty good. Some days better than others. That hot period we had with the direct sun, anytime you have direct sun and it's really hot, water temps bump into the 80s, and, fish get to be a little bit weirded out during the day. So it's more of a morning, evening thing, which is no surprise to a lot of anglers. But, scheduling fishing trips has been kind of a bear for me. But I was on the water the last couple of days and it was perfectly fine. Pretty good. Just smallmouth bass fishing, a few bluegill and largemouth throwing in, and steelhead and salmon will be coming in here in the next couple of weeks.
Awesome. That's exciting. I'm glad you're able to get out there, and hopefully after we get off this podcast, you'll be able to get out into the dove field.
I hope so.
Hey, Jay, I appreciate you coming on, joining me today, kind of bringing up, kind of kicking off really our migration alerts and our bonus episodes where we provide habitat and hunting updates throughout the country, but really kicking it off for the Great Lakes here in the Mississippi Flyway. I do appreciate it.
I always love being here anytime.
I'd like to thank my guest, Jay Anglin, the Great Lakes Migration Editor for Waterfowl 360 on ducks.org. I'd also like to thank our producer, Chris Isaac, for putting the show together and getting it out to you. And I'd like to thank you, the listener, for joining us on the DU podcast and supporting wetlands conservation.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the DU Podcast. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and visit www.ducks.org/DU Podcast for resources based on today's topics, as well as access to more episodes. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of Ducks Unlimited. Until next time, stay tuned to the Ducks.